Good afternoon. Grown Black Folks Talk. Our title today is about the number one trait of people that it is worth your time to avoid. I did a video recently about get away from regressive people. And it dawned on me that probably we have not talked enough about what makes someone regressive and reductive. Basically, in a world in which progress is necessary, in a knowledge based economy, in a communications age, how to get ahead versus how to go backwards and slide into irrelevancy. When I say regressive, this is what I mean. Well, the number one trait, how do you end up locked in this state where in a knowledge-based economy where people are able to do things they've never been able to do before in terms of supporting themselves, expressing their ideas, how are people staying behind? Well, there are some traits that go with that. And not only do you need to identify them in other people, you may not know that you have some of these traits going yourself because all of us need to improve in some way. To make progress is also to make progress for the self, to improve the self. Now, as soon as I start a video, the fog in San Francisco is going to come back in. Hold on, because you do need to see me. And that's about to disappear. So we just going, no cuts, no edits. This is just me sitting up here talking to y'all. So we need to get our light plugged in real quick. Okay, got that done. No cuts, no edits. And there we go. All right, now the fog can do whatever it wants because it's going to anyway. Okay, where was I? The number one trait that you see in people who are regressive. And there's two different versions, there's two different sides of the same coin. But basically, ingratitude, the inability to be thankful, and that stems from entitlement, the sense that you're owed something. Now, as Black people, there's one kind of entitlement that we and Native Americans and Latinos and Asians fight every other day. Certain people think they are entitled to be at the top of society and make all the important decisions and make life or death decisions for you and me without our input. And also, they are the spiritual descendants of people who believe they were entitled to 13 generations of free labor from Africans and 16 generations of the eradication and dispossession of the Native American and have no repentance. These are people who are entitled to have to teach all our children about the founding fathers who, despite their good sense of how to set up a government, were also people who committed crimes against humanity daily. But they're entitled to us revering them and not talking about that side of the story. We deal with that every day. It's called racism. We deal with that kind of entitlement every day. But there is another type that actually is closer to home and closer to you. And if you don't see it, it's a problem. I'll demonstrate this in this way. The history of the United States in which we live is what it is. But it does not mean that I am not grateful to live here because of the advantages that I have experienced. Eventually, freedom, civil rights, all those things did come. I'm grateful for my ancestors who decided to persevere through the 16 generations that it took for me to be able to sit here. So what I'm demonstrating is the situation was a hot mess. The history is what it is, but I'm not entitled to not have any sense of perspective about the United States. I'm not entitled to write it all off because I live here. That's not a progressive attitude. Nor is it a progressive attitude to assume that because the country is a certain way that I'm entitled to get opportunities for free. And this is where we get to the second kind of entitlement. And we don't like to talk about this because there is a legitimate debt owed. But if we don't talk about this, these are the kind of things that close to home really destroy your chances of going anywhere in life. And if you have these characteristics or you hang around people that have these characteristics, you will be written off in the 21st century. Simple as that. There is a kind of entitlement that comes from deprivation. I've now taught children for 24 years. That's a long time. I've observed a lot of things. I was still not an adult myself when I began. I've observed a lot of things. If a child does not get love and resources from their parents, that child as a human being will have a sense of having been deprived. Sometimes other family members, neighbors, and teachers will step into the gap as much as they can, But that sense of not having gotten something that that child really needed will then carry forward. It's subconscious, it's not necessarily intentional. It's not something that people are choosing. This is part of being human when you are going through deprivation. And this sense of being owed and this enraged about not having that debt paid, the human nature has to cope somehow. And one of the coping mechanisms is to expect for someone to come along, and then it becomes everyone else to come along and compensate for this gap. This is the entitlement that is bred from deprivation. The problem is, if you're coming from a deprived position, you're already at a disadvantage. This is not functional. You can be rich and feel entitled and get along for a very long time because you have resources. African Americans as a unit come from a less resourced position because of those 13 generations of labor that our ancestors were not paid for. So even though we are among the most likely to be deprived, because this does cover all races, this is the least functional attitude. Because here's what happens when you don't say thank you. And I mean this on every level. When you don't show gratitude to those things that are working, to those people that are doing the right thing towards you and towards situations where you can find some benefit, you get written off by people that are actually moving ahead in their life. Because the number one thing that people want you to do, if they do something for you, they want to be thanked. And if you deprive them this, they will cut you off. And then when your reputation precedes you, then you get caught off before you even show up. Doors get slammed that you didn't even know were there. In fact, no one's only going to show you. You're not going to get shown the doors and put out. You're not going to even be shown the door to get in to be put out. This is what happens. I'm 40, so I've now lived long enough to have lived as an adult for more than 20 years and see how I can get access to things that other people do not even know exist, because I make sure that when they do something for me, I thank them. I make sure that they know. Now, sometimes you forget. Like, life is busy, I understand. But as a practice of life, you're going to be in a very different place in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. So if your parents were the type of people or grandparents, you had self-centered people that raised you, okay, this is going to be a challenge because you didn't learn it from people who demonstrated this to you, nor did they teach you. I get it. But understand, whenever you hear this message, it's not functional for you in a knowledge-based economy where you're going to need a lot of people's help. You cannot hold all the opportunity and traps that are out there in your head in the 21st century. You simply can't do it. You're going to need a lot of people's help to get anywhere. Even though the tools exist to move faster than ever, you're going to need a lot of people's help. In a communication age, if you're not expressing that gratitude and doing that as a pattern of life and making sure that the people that do help you know that you appreciate them, you ain't gonna make it. Yes, I went back into African American vernacular English. You ain't gonna make it. Not at this point in the 21st century. Because doors are going to get closed on you that you don't even know is there. And if you don't start with resources when that start happening, you'll never have them. What I'm telling you about here, and then hanging around with people who have this kind of entitlement of deprivation, is very dangerous, because people write you off because you're with them. This is life or death that I'm talking to you about. And you won't see it right away, but it accumulates over time. There are people who are my age that, unless they make major changes in their attitude toward other people and their attitude toward gratitude, have topped out. When you think about the Karen phenomenon, these are women my age who have topped out. Their beauty is not going to get them any further than they are because they're 40. It goes downhill from here. It goes down here faster if you're not black. And it goes downhill faster if you have a bad attitude, but we all have to get old. We all have to give up our beauty and die. So their beauty is not going to get them any further than they are today in general. That attitude is going to hold them back. And with that attitude holding them back, they're not going to get anywhere else. And they're going to be more deprived and isolated. And by the way, I picked that example because it's well known, but there are people in your neighborhood and people in your family that you know right now. And maybe if you're not careful, you may look in the mirror in the morning and you may see a person like that. This is the number one trait of people that ain't gonna make it in the 21st century. The United States has always had and will always have a permanent underclass. If you are a person who lives in ingratitude, your ticket to be in that permanent underclass with everything you're trying to do and everyone you love is stamped. This is the number one attitude of regressive people. And I told you in my last video, avoid them. So this is grown black folks talk, or we talk about grown person stuff. Get into the habit of saying thank you and letting people know you appreciate them, so that that begins to accumulate opening doors and people feeling good about having you around. And if you're not in an environment where people understand the necessity and to do this, then you need to get out of that environment. You really do, because you're going to go right off the cliff. In a knowledge economy, in a communication age, the most important thing you can communicate is be sure to say thank you. Thank you for watching.